Good morning to you. It's Daybreak at I-Fiber 814 here this morning. I've got Mason County Commissioner Kevin Shutty on the air. Good morning, sir.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
I am well.
Good to see you.
Thanks for coming in today.
Yeah.
Over the last week, people started to receive their ballots in the mail here in Mason County and all throughout the county. There is a big question on there, raising the levy lid lift to $1.80 per $1,000 of assessed valuation, and conversations are to be had. What is the reasoning for bringing this up? What would some of these monies go to, and things like that. So first things first, I guess, let's talk about what the actual initiative, or not the initiative, but the vote that the people are taking, the levy lid, and those types of things.
Well, Jeff, first of all, I would say that this is probably one of the most important votes that the citizens of Mason County have had to take in a while. It's an opportunity for the voters to weigh in on the services that Mason County provides and the level at which they're funded. And, aside from electing their representatives in local and state and federal government, this is one of the most important things that folks can weigh in on. And so from that perspective, we're very anxious to see, how the results come in and what people are willing to spend to fund their government in Mason County. Part of the reasoning that this is on the ballot, may have to go back a number of years. Initiatives were passed by the people of Washington that limits the county's ability to increase taxes to provide services like public safety and criminal justice and other general government services. And so we're limited in the ways that we're able to tax the people that live in our counties, which is a good thing. I think it's a great check and balance, on the authority of a commission. And so this is one of the tools that the legislature has given us in response to those initiatives, is to go to the people and ask them to weigh in on the levy limit that we have in the county. And so by state law, we can't exceed $1.80 per thousand. The ballot measure that people have received on their ballot here in the past week or so would take it to $1.77, would be a 37-cent increase. And it would generate about $3.4 million for the county. Now, as you know, kind of the backdrop to this is the budget concerns and issues that we've been working through this year. And so when we went through the reductions in July, we had a conversation along with that said, well, let's give the people an opportunity to talk about kind of the services that Mason County provides and how they want to fund them. And so we ended up putting this ballot measure on for the November election. And so it would generate this money. My preference, my priority would be to go to the public safety and criminal justice side. And I think that's where a lot of the priority is for people in Mason County. I don't think that local government has a higher priority than providing for the public safety. And so, but we do have to also keep in mind that there would be some pretty significant impacts to the services provided by the other departments in the Mason County General Fund. And so that would include your auditor, treasurer, assessor's office. And so in a lot of the conversations that I've had, we have been going through the 2018 budget cycle, with an eye towards reality. And so we've seen a decrease in our projected revenue for this year. And so first and foremost, we've approached the 2018 budget by looking at ways to live within our means, which is, I think, the message that we have to keep reinstating with ourselves as we go through these budget processes and conversations. And so, first and foremost, live within our means. We have to be able to budget based on the revenue that we're collecting. Government, I think, really has to live with what the people are willing to send and provide, and not more. And over the past several years, the decisions by other commissions and previous budgets have put us in a position where we've spent more than we've taken in, and so we've reduced our reserves significantly, and it's put quite a financial strain on the county. And so, first and foremost, live within our means. And one of the things that I think is taking us in that direction, and it might give people some additional things to consider as they sit down with their ballot and they think, well, how are we going to prevent this situation from happening again? We don't want to just hand over a blank check to the county, which I respect that. I think that's a good question to be asking if you're a voter. I've brought forward a balanced budget resolution that would mandate that the commission spends only what it takes in revenue. Any excess revenue would go into reserve So we'll go into our savings so that we're prepared for emergencies and we have appropriate cash flow to operate the government. And we don't get ourselves into these financial crises that we've seen, in particular over the summer. Also, it says that when you have reserve funding, when you have savings, you spend that on one-time or emergency expenditures. And so you don't commit that to ongoing expenses, which is the problem that we've seen over the past few budgets, has been relying very heavily on those reserve dollars in order to fund the government, and that's just not acceptable. And so I've brought forward those proposals, and we're ready to take action on those this week. And so that's a very strong protection to the taxpayers in Mason County as they sit down and look at their ballot.
You mentioned public safety and then the auditor's office, and throughout the list of potential recipients, do you have them categorized by a percentage? Like, we're thinking that public safety or criminal justice would receive blank percentage of the monies brought in?
So initially when we began to have these conversations back in the late summer, a proposal came forward that would have prioritized criminal justice and public safety. Unfortunately, we weren't able to come to an agreement on those funding levels. I proposed an alternative that would have provided a majority of the dollars to public safety and criminal justice, but also would reduce the impact of the projected cuts for next year on the other offices. I wasn't able to get agreement on that either. However, whether the ballot measure passes in a couple of weeks or it doesn't, I'm going to continue to fight to prioritize what it is we do in local government. And for me, those priorities are public safety and criminal justice. And then we look at all the other things that are mandated by the state legislature that counties have to provide. So, I'll be looking at things like, the elections, making sure that we have appropriate staffing in our elections office to ensure fair and secure elections. Mm-hmm. Make sure that we have appropriate staffing levels and things of those nature. So I think regardless of whether or not the ballot measure passes, we have to have a long, hard look at how we prioritize the services that we provide.
I know this is just your first year on the county commission here, moving into the second, and without placing blame or looking at decisions made in commissions past, but there are potentials annually for the commission to put at an increase to its citizens without a vote of the people. So by holding off on those for so many years, I think it's been at least maybe almost 10 years that those have been held off, did that kind of also lead us to where we are today? And if the ballot measure doesn't pass, will you guys look to implementing that?
So we've planned. So by law, we're allowed to take a 1% increase annually in property tax. Last year it was taken, and that amounted to about a $90,000 bump. Mm-hmm. When you look at the level at which our costs increase versus even with the 1%, what our revenue is generating, we're not anywhere near being able to even break even. Okay. And so we have found a way to outspend ourselves so much that even with the 1%, we're not breaking even. Over the past several years, about a 5-year period, our costs and spending have increased by about 28%, and revenue has increased by about 12%. That's you don't need to have a PhD in mathematics to know that that's a pretty big gap to have to close. And so, we came into 2017. The budget that was passed before I took office had about a $4 million deficit that was plugged with reserve dollars. And so we really got to take some inventory on how we do our own budgeting and how we make those decisions. And so as we go through the 2018 budget cycle, regardless of whether or not the ballot measure passes, we have to make sure that we're living within our means and we're being responsible with the people's money.
So if it looks like a 28%, you say, increase over the last couple years or whatever, where does that get us if the ballot measure is approved? Does that bring us close in line? If I'm not mistaken, you said maybe 3.7 million would come in.
So it'd be about 3.4 million, and depending on how our end of the year revenue looks, and we've seen some strong numbers with sales tax, collections going up this year, so we're doing better than projected there. So I think that would give us an opportunity to close most of the gap that was created by the 2017 budget. We had some very difficult and painful cuts that we made in July. and that really left a lot of offices reeling.
Yeah.
And then, here we are turning around and saying, okay, now we need another 10% out of your budget. And it makes it very difficult for these offices to plan, makes it very difficult for the people who come to work every day in the county, to have any kind of faith in kind of, the future. But what we have to figure out is, how we bring these things back into reality based on what we're collecting. So we're projecting about $31.3 million in revenue for next year. We have to be prepared to budget based on $31.3 million. If the ballot measure passes, that would add about $3.4 million to that.
What are the upcoming meetings? I thought I had a list of them up for folks to. Oh, yeah, here we go. So today's the 23rd. So tomorrow, Public Works is talking about their budget. And then the 25th, Wednesday, there's a couple through the court systems.
Right.
And looks like November 1, the sheriff and district court. And then there's always times for citizens to sit in on these.
Absolutely. And so, people are going to be sitting down with their ballots, and and they're going to be taking a look at their their own pocketbook and what they think they can afford. And one of the things that I did early on was I sat down and I took a look at my property tax bill. And I pay roughly $2,700 a year in property taxes. Of that, about $370 goes to the county's general fund. So the rest of that, about $2,300, goes to school districts, fire districts, hospital districts, road districts, and then you have $370 a year for me to operate a year-round, 24/7, 365, sheriff's department, a court that's mandated to be open 5 days a week, an assessor's office that has to evaluate 65,000 parcels in the county. We have an auditor's office that does licensing and recording on demand, plus has to run safe and fair elections, and and on and on and on.
Wow.
And so it's for me. I sat down with my wife and we talked about what it is that we think we're able to afford, and I know that those are conversations that are going to be happening all over the county. And I just encourage people, get involved in the process. If you have not yet been to one of our budget workshops this year or in the past, now is the time. Pick up the phone, call me, email me, come by and see me. Let me know what your priorities are. Always interested in hearing directly from the people in Mason County, because it's their government and I want to represent them well.
You can find Commissioner Shutty and the other two commissioners as well on the county's website. We'll put the links to that in the show notes. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Jeff.
Have a good rest of your day.
You too.